Chapter 2. I need you to do me another favor. I need you to sit down on the floor. Don't worry if it's a little dirty. You won't be there too long. Now stretch your legs out in front of you and pull your knees up to your chest. Wrap your arms around your legs and rest your head on your knees for a second. Then take a couple of deep breaths in and out. It's pretty relaxing to sit with your head on your knees like that, right? I bet you sit like that a lot. Maybe when you want to think for a little bit or when you're waiting for something to happen. You probably think that it's no big deal, that everyone can do it. Well, Georgie can't. It doesn't bother him, really, not to be able to rest his head on his knees when he needs to do some thinking. But the thing is, he can't, even if he wanted to. You can get up now. No more homework, no more homework, Andy chanted as he and Georgie raced across the icy parking lot to Mrs. Moretti's car. Their backpacks were lighter than they'd been in weeks. Hello, boys, Andy's mom greeted them as they piled into the car. Are you glad it is vacation? Mrs. Moretti had a thick accent, and Georgie always liked the way she made English sound like a foreign language. No more homework, Andy cried again. Georgie laughed. When they got to Andy's house, Georgie called his mother to let her know where they were. But he kept his coat on and zipped up. Andy did too. As soon as Georgie hung up the phone, the boys sped right back out the door. For the past 3 weeks, Georgie and Andy had been running their own business to raise money for Christmas presents. It had been Georgie's idea. He figured he was getting too old to give his parents just Christmas cards he made in school, and he still wanted to spend his allowances on comics. So he decided that he and Andy should start a dog walking business after school. He knew Andy would agree to it, since he loved dogs, but couldn't have one because his dad was allergic. Did you decide what we're going to do with all the money when we get it? Georgie asked Andy on the way to Mrs. Kipp's house. Today was Friday, payday. Yeah, Andy said. I've been saving up for Galactic Traders. You know, that new game. Well, that's if I don't get it for Christmas. If so, then I'll probably buy Starbase Invasion 7. Cool, Georgie said. He didn't know how much about video games since he couldn't really play them. He had trouble working the controllers, so all he could do was watch while Andy played, and that wasn't much fun. They knocked on Mrs. Kipp's door, and she handed them Buster, her Cocker Spaniel. Be sure you bring him back before he gets too cold, Mrs. Kipp told them while Georgie fastened on Buster's leash. 15 minutes later, they were walking, all 6 of their dogs. Georgie always walked the small ones, and Andy took charge of the bigger ones. One time, Georgie had tried to hold on to Tanya, the Great Dane, but when she'd caught sight of a squirrel, she'd run so fast that Georgie thought she was going to rip off his arm. So now he stuck with Buster and the 2 poodles, even though he thought poodles were too fancy for their own good. But at least they didn't yank too hard on their leashes. So you know what I was thinking, Andy said as they waited for Apollo, the golden retriever, to sniff a tree. What? Georgie asked. Well, I think there's probably a lot more dogs in this neighborhood. Maybe 20 even. We could be making way more money. Yeah, but how are we going to walk 20 more dogs? We could get another partner, Andy said, to help us out. Georgie raised an eyebrow. Like who? What about that kid Russ? Andy asked. I told him about it, and he said it sounded cool. He said he wanted to help. Andy had to stop talking for a second to untangle Apollo's and Tanya's leashes. So, he continued after a minute, what do you think? Georgie let out a long breath and watched as it left his mouth like a cloud in the cold air. I don't know, he said. I don't really know Russ. Russ Wilkins had moved to their town about a month ago. He was in Mr. Meyer's class too. But all Georgie really knew about him was that he had hair that was so blonde it was almost white. That, and the fact that he was an awesome basketball player. Georgie had watched him at recess when he'd made 11 free throws in a row. That's cool, Andy said, his boots crunching in the snow as he walked. You'd like him. I hung out with him the other day when you were sick. All of a sudden, Georgie knew what he did not want Russ to be their own partner. He'd rather have anyone else, even Jeannie the meanie, but not Russ Wilkins. He looked down at the dogs, trying to think of something to say. I don't think it's a very good idea, Georgie said. I think it should just be us. Otherwise, we'd have to split the money, and we wouldn't be making more anyway. Andy nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess, he said. He sounded disappointed, and Georgie didn't like it. They were silent for a long time after that. They just walked the dogs and watched them sniff trees and didn't say anything. Georgie was about to tell Andy fine if he really wanted to. He guessed Russ could join their business, but only once a week maybe. But right as Georgie was opening his mouth, Andy spoke. I think Buster's getting old, he told Georgie. We should probably go back. Yeah, Georgie said. I think the poodles are starting to freeze too. Andy laughed. They're pupsicles, he said. Georgie snorted so hard he had to wipe his nose. Poodle pops, he said in between laughs. By the time they'd returned all the dogs and had money bulging in their pockets, Andy seemed to have forgotten all about Ross Wilkins. Georgie was glad he hadn't said anything. Dog walking was definitely better with only two people.